today with World War II veteran. My name is Deb Lagerquist, and I'm from Jacksonport. I'm a member of the American Legion in Sturgeon Bay, and it's my honor to talk with Bea about Bircher. And so you go by B?
Yes.
Okay, B. That's good. All B's I see here. So we'll let you start by telling us what you did in World War II, what you went in with, and what service, and...
Oh, I went into the service in October of 1943, and that was soon after I graduated from St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we, many of our friends who had joined, because since our graduation was immediately after we had graduated, why they did form a unit, but we elected to work for a while, and then we went down to see what branch of the service we would, if we had a choice, where we would go. So we were fortunate because my friend and I joined the service together, and we were assigned together throughout the campaigns until VE Day in Europe.
So you joined the Army?
We joined the Army Nurse Corps.
Okay. Now, was that considered part of the WACs, or that was separate?
No, definitely not.
That was the Army Nurse Corps?
We were the Army Nurse Corps.
Okay, make that clear. And so from Chicago, that's where you signed up?
Yes.
And then where did they send you to
Then we got on the
initiated?
train and went to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
And we were there for approximately, maybe, I don't know, probably 10, maybe a couple of weeks. And, you know, then we were processed and given our uniforms, and we really had basic training because that was a training center for a lot of military people. I remember we had to do the obstacle course, and we had to do all these things, and it was really quite a challenge. So we didn't know where we were going, but we got all of our luggage marked and given our uniforms and, you know, the regular processing thing. And then it was in October, I think. Then, let's see, I didn't...
Yes, you have down here October that you left for Yuma, Arizona.
Yeah. Of course, I don't know that we were told where we were going. We were told that we were going to leave, and so we were put on a troop train, and with everybody was on the same train, enlisted men, officers, and so we were on this train for I guess we left on the 11th of October, and 27th, and then we got into Yuma, Arizona. It seemed like 3 weeks, of course, with the troop train. And then when we arrived there, why then there were some we were traveling in these woolen uniforms, which was really a challenge. But then when we got there, well, then we traveled, had our bedroll and our backpack and all that stuff. And we went out into this area where somebody had already been and set up the tents, and for us we were going to be on maneuvers near the Mojave Desert. So, and
so what was the temperature in Yuma in
that time?
November?
Well, I think it was really quite warm, but you know, at night it did get cool, and we lived in I think it was called a platoon tent, because there were 6 cots set up, and we each had a cot, and but you know, the temperatures were not nearly the challenge of the sand, because we were out in this. Everything was sand. So.
Yeah, that must have been quite a change coming from Wisconsin, going out there in the middle of nowhere, Yuma, Arizona, and it's not much better today.
No,
it's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, right.
So is that where you then learned about setting up the evac hospital and?
Yes, that was the principle. We did not have any patients. We were not set up as a functioning unit because we didn't even know where we were going or what we were going to do, but we went for instruction in tropical diseases because it was an expectation that we would be going into the Pacific. So we, and so they put us on K rations so we'd be sure and be used to the food. And, you know, just daily living. We went on 5-mile hikes. Then in the setup we had, then occasionally we would go out into the desert on maneuvers and just get accustomed to setting up a hospital and just a basic. And then we would be on 5-day maneuvers or 3-week maneuvers, and then we would come back into our permanent setup, awaiting to see where we were going to be assigned. So this went on, and we were assigned to different units because twice we had been assigned to an evacuation hospital, and then it was during the time when the Battle of the Bataan was going on the march. So they eliminated nurses from their quota, but then they kept us there. And then I think it was in it was in, let's see, when I forget the dates. That's why I have them written down. That we were given our final leave once more, and then they sent us to Pomona, California, because they gave us instruction in judo by the 1st Filipino Regiment, and they thought, I guess, if we could defend ourselves, maybe we would make the you know, the Pacific Theater, but that didn't happen. So then, finally then in May, and in the meantime, I think when we actually worked in a station hospital for 5 days, and that was the only hands-on experience that we had during this interim. And they had offered a class in anesthesia. We didn't have patients, but there was some far-sighted captain said, well, we had 2 anesthetists, and if we ever set up, we'll have to have more anesthetists. So I signed up for the class just because it was something to do. So then when we came back from this one leave, then when we came back in, we went to, they had said we were not going to go to the Pacific. So then it was in May, then, no, July, I see, I've forgotten the dates. We came back and we were put on a train for Camp Swift, Texas. And then we realized we wouldn't be going to the Pacific. So we stayed at Camp Swift for until August, and there it was just more training and getting everything marked and going on maneuvers and going on hikes. And then we went by troop train then to the East Coast and went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and were processed and then taken to the New York Harbor, and then we got on this, it was a Dutch ship, it was the Mauritania, and the, it was
That's a big
yeah,
liner.
it was a big ship. But no, it was very crowded. I mean, we were put down in the lower level with all the nurses. But anyway, the time of year was in August, so the sailing was pretty smooth. But I remember the course was zigzagging, because there were submarines all in the harbor. And that
Did they ever say if they saw any submarines?
We never knew anything.
Oh, okay.
No.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, probably so.
And so then where did you land?
We landed in Liverpool.
Oh, okay.
And then I think we only disembarked from the Mauritania, and then we went directly onto a troop train. And then we went from there to Cheddar, England, and now we were billeted in private homes there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for a brief time, and then because I know we biked, this lady who we lived with, it was very nice. And again, I was so fortunate because my friend and I were billeted together, and then we just went for more training because we were waiting what orders we would have, and so our our instruction changed from malaria and tropical
sure.
diseases, what we might encounter as far as injuries are concerned.
Now, were the English people happy to see
They were.
American nurses coming over?
We were treated well. We were treated very well. This lady that we were billeted with, her husband was in the RAF, so
Oh,
she
okay.
was, we just slept there. We went to, our own place for quarters, but yeah, she was.
So that was a part of England that the Germans weren't
They
routinely
were not.
bombing?
No,
And, well, thank
no.
goodness for that.
Yeah, that's
And-
right. No, that was, there were no, I mean, actually, there was no sign of war where we were.
It's out in the countryside.
Yes, that's right. Cheddar is actually, it's more of a recreation and a tourist attraction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then after we left there, well, then we were going to take our, they had this, I suppose, assignment where we would be going to Europe. And then we went down to Weymouth, and then we got on an LST, but then there was a big storm at the channel. So then we came back, and everybody got so sick. But we weren't on the channel, We were in that. They switched us around to Portsmouth Harbor, and then we sailed from that for 3 days later, I think. And by the time we reached the beach, because my friend, this was not the friend I was with, but we decided, because LST was a landing ship training, I think I call it. But there were flat.
Just like they used for D-Day.
Yeah,
landing
right,
on the
that's
beach
right.
and-
So that was our transportation. So we did stay topside, which was a relief, because if you went down below, you couldn't get back. It was terrible. Anyway, then when we did arrive, it was not dark on the beach, because we landed on Omaha Beach.
And isn't that something to have landed on Omaha Beach a
Yeah.
couple months after
That's true.
the D-Day?
Yeah, right.
So,
And then we heard all these guys, and they, because somebody must have said that, and they said, "Get those GD women out of here." Nobody was happy.
no loitering on the beach.
Right. But then they did, we got to ride up to the top of that hill. But I know some of the people that didn't, they really had because that trip had been so terrible.
So did it make you think how, what an accomplishment it was for those soldiers
Oh,
under all that heavy German
Yeah.
fire to get up those cliffs?
That's right. I mean, I think we were all crying, really,
Yeah,
by the time that.
really, really meant something to you
Then
then to
we
see
knew
it.
this was war.
Yes,
Yeah.
So then from Omaha Beach, where did they send you to
Then
actually
we-
set up?
We didn't set up then until we reached, we went through an area called Carentan. And that, wherever we were, we didn't know where we were because we were always just in the countryside. And I think that area had not been liberated too far,
Oh, ahead of time,
yeah.
ahead of you getting
So
there.
there we unpacked our supplies, and this one, many of the, because we had a turnover of a lot of different nurses because we were assigned to different, but we had a lot of southern nurses with us, and so she decided, we knew we were going to be intense, so she decided to, somehow they got sheets, so she decided to line the tents with sheets. And that would make it lighter, which was a good idea. So that's what we did in this peach orchard or wherever it was. And I wasn't a seamstress, so I volunteered to unpack the instruments, which were really, really excellent German instruments. They were made. It was a challenge to get all the axle grease off. But,
Oh, yes.
So then we stayed there then until we got our orders, and we realized we were going to be the 111th hospital, and we were going to be supporting the 9th Army. And as far as the logistics of the Army, I don't pretend to know.
Was the 9th Army Patton's?
Yes, yeah.
So then, how far behind the lines did you usually set up an evacuation
It
hospital?
really depended. There were, as I say, I don't remember the logistics, but it was so many evacuations hospitals. First there was a first aid unit, and then a field hospital sometimes, and then the evacuation hospital. So then we operated on a rotating basis. So sometimes we were the first ones to receive the casualties from the battles, and then we would stay in place and give immediate treatment to the more severe injured.
Doing triage.
Yes, right. And then we might get to be I think there were 8 or 9 hospitals to support these.
Well, you were at that first aid, that first line hospital.
Yeah.
You must have been able to hear the
Oh, yeah,
battle
yeah.
going on.
When our
and the
first setup,
engagements.
actually, as a hospital, we were not in tents. We were in Heerleen, Holland, and that was, they realized on this record keeping, and they realized I'd had this course in anesthesia, so I was sent on detached service to a station hospital for 3 weeks, and I gave anesthetics for lots and lots of anesthetics. And then our hospital started functioning in Heerleen, Holland, in, let's see, that was during the Battle of the Bulge. So when...
Oh my, so that was in the wintertime
yeah,
then.
it was. We were there for Christmas.
Wow.
And actually, we were... let's see, I lost
So
my
that
page.
must have been here in the fall of
Here it is.
44
Yeah.
then that you were there.
Right. I think our first patient was November the 11th in 44. And then we stayed at that location until in March of 45.
Now, did you have trouble dealing with the cold in the hospital setting that the troops had in the field? Or
No, not in that location.
You had good
because
heaters and
I
things?
don't remember if we had...
But you didn't have trouble with the cold?
No,
'cause-
we had no bathing facilities, so I don't know my friend, how she did it. A lot of things happen that you don't know how they happened. But anyway, she made an arrangement with this Catholic, it was a hospital in Heerleen. So, and I think we bargained our soap and and we could go take a bath, once or twice a week, which that was really nice.
So was it interesting dealing with the French language there? And
We had absolutely no contact with the civilians, no.
Okay.
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay.
But nurses, the first commanding officer we had was not happy that he had nurses in his unit, and he made it very apparent when we
Oh,
arrived
my.
there. But he didn't, he was there all during that period, and then he disappeared, and then we got a regular Army colonel, and he was
Much better.
much better to us. He didn't mistreat us, but it was like we weren't there, so.
And I should point out, I didn't ask you, that you went in as a second lieutenant.
Yes, and that was automatic for all nurses.
Right. So even though you nurses were officers, you weren't getting the respect that you deserved from that first officer.
No, well,
But
we were just tolerated.
Yes,
And that is what he told us. If he had had a choice, there would be no women in his.
But for the most part, were you treated pretty well as far as the respect and?
We were treated, I mean, we didn't go to movies because there was a distinct policy for enlisted men, and nurses were not supposed to. And
Fraternization.
Yes, and I don't know whether they did or not. I had some really good friends that I worked with, and that was, I mean, it was, I don't know that any nurses, nobody, I don't think anybody, we were so busy doing everything.
Didn't have time.
And nobody cared really what anybody, so, but as far as respect was concerned, I mean, I never knew of anyone who
Well, that's good.
had any, yes, it was good. And, everybody respected everybody's privacy, and even though you lived in that school building where we lived, I mean, during the Battle of the Bulge, we were in a great big kind of, I think there were all of us, I guess, were in that, so there were 40 of us, there were 40 nurses assigned. So we lived in this big room and we had a cot, you know.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure during that period that you were kept very busy with incoming patients and.
And if the surgery, if for some reason, because like you say, it was all set up as a triage and they went out and evaluated who was on the most urgent case, I gave anesthetic for an orthopedic surgeon most of the time. So we had a lot of amputations, a lot of debridement, a lot of repair.
So that anesthesia class you took to fill the time ended up doing
well. That's
well
why it was on my
you.
record. So then they sent me to undetached service to Maastricht Station Hospital because I had very little clinical experience. But I tell you, the people in the operating rooms, there were usually 6 operating rooms, whether you were in a tent or in a room, and there was so much good help that was there to help me because I needed the help.
So it was a little bit like the MASH TV show
Very
as
much
far as
like-
everyone
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
all kind of crammed in
That's
there,
right.
but
yeah,
everybody knew their job.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now you brought along a picture here of the setup of an evacuation hospital, and so this was a pretty standard
that was a
setup
standard,
for
right.
the different tents and
the quarters.
the quarters and
The
administration
right.
offices and things,
Yeah.
and so
receiving and nurses' quarters, you know, everybody evacuation. I mean, employed. Yeah,
so
and we had a mess hall. So.
So now you have the red crosses on the roof of your
Right.
tents, and for the most part, did the Germans respect that as far as
we were
attacking
concerned,
hospitals?
yeah, because
and-
when we were, as I say, we were in a building, but they were still painted. But we never had, but we, you know, it was ridiculous, the arguments that we had because these buzz bombs, or they were,
Oh,
what they
yes.
were going over. And, you know, I guess it was just a emotional outlet because we would argue, now is that Big Charlie or is that a big? Just, anyway.
You're right.
But
Well,
nobody, the biggest number of casualties that we received at one time, it was, I think it was an infantry support division that was close by, and they were in a building that had a lot of glass because a lot of the attacks, I believe, were done after dark, or it seemed that way. That's when we got the casualties. Anyway, they did drop their, you know, they did the strafing, and then we got all these casualties with eye injuries.
oh, sure, all the glass
Yeah,
shards
right.
and,
So that was a dramatic time, but fortunately, for some reason, one of our doctors was an ophthalmologist, which that was a blessing during that time.
And just in case everyone wouldn't be familiar, the buzz bombs were those bombs that sort of had their own motor,
Yeah,
and then it would
yeah.
just quit,
Yeah, right.
and it would
yeah,
fall
right,
wherever.
right, wherever
And
yeah.
did you have any that fell close at any time?
See,
or,
they
well,
were
that's
aiming
good.
for Aachen, and we were
Oh.
in Herleen, Holland, which was only 9 kilometers, which was very close. So that was I think that's why we had.
So that was
this
about
big
6
argument.
miles. Yeah, that's still close enough.
That was why we always.
Yes, yes,
keep going,
but, so now with an evacuation hospital, that's not one that you just quickly pack up and move?
No, we were a
That's
semi-mobile.
like the field
Yeah,
hospital
right.
would do that, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, and we had field units, they were not even hospitals, but there were these surgical support units. If they traveled all over and we went where they were needed. No, our unit was not that mobile.
so is that where you stayed then until VE Day? Was there in
You mean- no,
Herleen,
no.
or
No.
you got sent a couple places?
Then we traveled around, which, unless I look at that paper, I really can't tell you because.
Oh, you did go into Germany,
Yeah, oh yeah,
cross the Rhine River
yeah,
to Dulken, Germany.
yeah.
And Bad Salz.
That's Alzuflen, oh, yeah.
Yeah, good, I'll let you say
Yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah,
and in April. So, now You didn't ever get any of the POW camp?
Well, after VE Day, oh,
People-
well, yes, during the war, the most, it was upsetting. We had a SS trooper.
Oh,
I was giving him an anesthetic, and he was big, and he was healthy. And I always restrained him, and usually there was somebody else there. And I think he just had some shrapnel. It wasn't a big
thing.
But anyway, I was giving him an anesthetic, and somehow, he was able to get himself apart from that restraint. But anyway, I yelled, and he didn't.
Came running quick, huh?
And he didn't get the needle up his
Uh-huh.
arm. So that was. But so we did take care of some casualties, but it had to be almost an emergency kind of thing until they could get.
Oh, okay.
And no civilian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was probably maybe some of those field units that would have,
I think
if someone
so.
had been involved,
I think
the
so.
civilians. But,
Yeah.
How soon after VE Day did you all get the word? Did that go
Well,
around
we
right
knew
away?
very soon because all of a sudden here we were just out in the field someplace, and because all these deluge of DPs were,
And what is DP?
of displaced people.
Yes, uh-huh.
And they were flooding the countryside, but we were instructed we were not to give them any food, and we were not supposed to take care of any injuries. Now, I think it did happen. I know it did happen.
And the reason for that was you needed to conserve your supplies and resources for the American troops
Yes.
or other Allied troops.
That's exactly right.
So, well, did you all throw a party or something then?
No,
Or you didn't
I
have
don't-
time?
I don't think we did, because you really didn't know what was real and what wasn't.
Probably had been rumors off and on.
Yeah, right. So then, and we, I'm sure we did. We celebrated with relief, and everybody felt, this is but then at that time, soon after VE Day, by then we traveled around because we were looking for a location. Our unit was going to be divided because some of the people had been in the service in a certain way, and they divided us so those of us with less time in the service, if it was needed, then we would be going to the Pacific.
Oh, yes.
So that's when my friend that I say, we joined the Army together. She was quite a bit older than I, so she was taken, and some of the older doctors were separated from that unit. So then, after that, then we set up hospitals, and actually it was people that had injuries that needed care, and they had to go through all the point systems to see who was going to get to be discharged first. So we treated those people, and then we kept moving because I think it was just a matter of getting us out of the way to make the process continue.
Yeah, it says here on your notes that you were at Gretel, Germany, and then Karlsdorf
Oh, yeah.
and Stuttgart. So they
Yeah.
did have you about once a month. They were
Yeah,
having
we
you
just
pick
got
up
in
and
the truck
move. And,
yeah.
so what are your memories of VJ Day?
Well, VJ Day, we were already awaiting. So it wasn't nearly as jubilant, probably because it didn't affect us. And we had already been, I think we had already been told that we would not be going to Japan or the Pacific. So I think we had already, now we were just intent on going home. So.
Now, I should point out you have some other photos that you brought in. Were these some of your good friends from?
And those were, I might point out, those were the seersucker dresses, which I was amazed I even had a picture. Because we were in fatigues all the time because to work in a tent with dresses on.
Right, right.
So I think I took that picture to make sure everybody knew we had
Uh-huh.
those dresses.
And then where were these areas that looked like they had been bombed out by the Germans?
This was in Cologne, Germany,
Mhm.
and I think that's where all of these were from.
Oh,
But some of the
okay.
beautiful cathedrals
What a
that you did
shame.
see.
And it looks
And-
like there was a main bridge that
bridge.
must have been taken
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
and so you really got to see the war
Oh,
up
yeah,
close.
yeah.
Fortunately, you didn't have active bombing, but
No, not
you still
on
saw all the effects.
We were there, and we heard a lot of,
mhm.
some of those big,
Yes, uh-huh.
we were close enough. I was-
Yes.
But it made you realize what war was
Mhm.
because of the proximity of where we were.
Mhm.
And sometimes our casualties that we received had not received other care.
Mhm.
Because if the field hospitals that were supporting that particular division didn't have enough clientele, and then they
Overwhelmed.
would just
Mm,
put them
oh.
in the ambulance and bring them, because they had these, ambulances that they had their orders where to take these patients.
Mhm.
So we weren't aware of what was going on but somebody knew where we were to be receiving the casualties.
Now, when they would move you around from place to place, were you usually in a Jeep, or were you in a
We were in a
troop
6x6
carrier?
truck most of the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, was a big truck and then had bench seats. That's usually, sometimes we were in a convoy with,
Let's see, I don't think I have those pictures
Oh,
here,
maybe.
but,
anyway.
and so you'd have everybody all loaded up in,
Yeah, and they were just, they were enclosed,
let's see.
but it doesn't, it
I see
really-
they have some of the trucks that are looks like under camouflage, and that looks like
Yeah.
you're in front of somebody's castle there.
Yeah. I think that those are, see, sometimes we just stopped along the way, and I think we stayed overnight in some area.
Did you get to go inside and look around?
We
to do
took
those
a
fancy?
leave once, my friend and I took a 3-day leave up in a castle in, that was in Cologne, yeah. And we had, if our hospital wasn't near if we were not receiving casualties and if we had accumulated leave, then there was opportunities for us to travel.
So, I had mentioned Pat Earl. You didn't ever see him driving
No.
by or anything, or?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
I did have someone ask me this was after VE Day, and we were still just waiting. So there was a POW camp that this officer asked us if we would like to go see this POW camp, which we did. Of course, it was not active at that time. But, I think I just blocked it out of my mind.
Now, was that a camp where American soldiers had
Yes,
been kept?
that's
and,
right.
Yeah.
Because we weren't even aware that's how we were going, but.
Now, did some of the soldiers tell you any stories then about things they had seen? Or
I
if
think,
the-
by the time they reached our hospital, they really were more intent upon seeing women than they were about telling
Talking.
us. Because, and they were not, I don't mean they wanted anything but a pat on
Right,
the-
it was just a reminder of
hold my
home.
hand.
Yes.
And then I remember so many times they'd say, could you lean a little closer just so I can smell a woman? But they weren't being fresh.
Right.
They were really, I never had any of that kind of experience, so. And I don't think we went out as a group because you had plenty of those kind of opportunities if you had the time and wanted to. Because there were Air Force, there was everything, you could go out, it was much, we worked 12-hour shifts. And then every 2 weeks, we changed shifts. So on those times, then you worked like until 6 o'clock in the morning until noon, and then you went back to work on 6 o'clock that night. So, but you had sometimes when you weren't working either. So there was, and then, you know, then they would tell you, and we supported the 9th Army, and then we deserted. We supported the 87th Infantry quite a bit, and now those guys that, you know, they were in so many battles that I think that's all they could think about and talk about. So it was terrible, really terrible. I mean, it was just terrible.
It was, some of those guys were over there for several years,
That's
and it was
right.
one campaign after
Yeah,
another.
they had been in Africa, and then they came into the European theater. So, you know, some of them had been there for 5 years. So it was a different, different war for those. And that's why I always felt when he came back, you know, everybody, not a lot of people, they gave you, nurses really, that we had experiences, but I mean, it was nothing, nothing like the GIs and anyone that was exposed to the gunfire and the slaughter. And
Well, of course, you gained a lot of medical experience,
Yes, I
such
did.
that when you got back into civilian life,
Yes.
you were used to handling, you know, kind of chaotic
Yeah,
conditions, and pressure, and like you said, those long hours,
Right.
and seeing things that a lot of young nurses shortly after getting out of school wouldn't have had the opportunity
No.
to work with, and so it gave you valuable experience.
Yeah, I think
but-
that was the biggest adjustment was, like probably today's veterans, it is the return to civilian life, because we came back in December, and so the glory of the returning troops had sort of subsided.
Faded,
So
the
we
big
landed in
parades
the
and-
port, yeah. There was no confetti, no, we landed in New York Harbor, and I know they took us, it was in the late afternoon, and we got on this truck to go to Camp Kilburn, and we all wanted a hamburger, you know. That's what we had decided, that was gonna be our big treat. And so there was nothing open, of course, we didn't stop along the way. But we went to this PX, that was all that was open. And so there was nothing. So it said chopped ham, so we thought, oh, guess what? It was
Spam.
spam. So
More like
yeah,
K-rations
is
again.
Is this homecoming? So,
Now, you said you came into New York Harbor, so did you see the Statue of Liberty?
we did,
And
yes, and
what-
we
Did
cried.
that really? Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, and everybody got, we were the, near the last ones to get off, and I think it was not any discrimination. It was just the way we were
Right, you were loaded
billeted,
in there.
yeah. And yeah, that
Now,
was,
you came back in December, as you said.
Yes.
How was the crossing that time? Because the
we were on a
Atlantic can be a little
smaller
rougher.
ship. We were on the SS John Ericsson. It was a Swedish ship, and it was rough. And as I say, it was not nearly as big as, but I think because it was a smaller ship, we were up closer to the top, so, and maybe it
a
wasn't
little
so-
better experience
yeah.
than being down in the
Right,
hold, yes,
yeah.
and
So I think everybody was just anticipating
Sure.
getting there.
and the fact that you were coming home
Yeah,
made it
that's right.
okay.
Yeah, I forgot about
What's a
that.
few ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well, let's before we end here, also talk about what a sharp-looking officer you were here in your Class A uniform. Was this taken then when you first got in?
Yes,
or?
that was the initial uniform, because when we were inducted, and our paperwork at that time was actually handled through the Red Cross.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I still have my Red Cross button, which, of course, I think that was eliminated soon after. I joined in 1943.
43.
Yeah. And so then, yeah, that was the way that was handled at that time. And we were issued, like I say, at Camp McCoy, we were issued our first uniforms, and they were like a navy wool top, a dress uniform, and a teal blue skirt, and then this cape. It was a huge wool cape and a maroon.
Sort of like Florence Nightingale,
yeah,
huh?
right. And then that kind of a hat.
Well, at least you had a decent hat.
Yeah.
When I was in, my Class A hat was a beret.
Oh.
Totally useless hat.
Oh, yeah,
So at
yeah,
least
yeah,
yours was
yeah.
a sharper
Yeah.
looking hat.
Well, then
And,
after this one, then we had like,
did you get to wear the baseball cap when you were in your fatigues, or
we didn't even,
wear a hat?
we wore a helmet. We
Oh, sure.
We had to wear a helmet a lot of the time.
Well, and also here by your picture, we have some of your medals. And this one is the Meritorious Service Medal. And this one is the European African Eastern Campaign Medal. But this one is your Bronze Star. And so, although everyone who served over in Europe got the European Campaign Medal, not everybody got Bronze Stars, and you've got a 3-star cluster here. So that means you were very, very well respected for the work you did there in the evacuation hospitals. And so glad that you said Deb Hart from the County Veteran Service Office helped you get these medals that you had earned. And so that's great that you did that, because like I said, you definitely earned these medals. And so now you got out at Fort Sheridan in January of '46. So you didn't ever think of making it a career, or did they pretty much want all the Army nurses to separate?
You know, I think it was just automatic.
Yes, okay.
It was never, I don't know of anyone who.
That stayed in.
No, or it was, and you know, now I know you're given some orientation about what benefits, if they were given. I don't really remember. I was just waiting to get on a train to go home.
Now, did you get out as a first lieutenant?
Yes.
You made that while you were in?
Yeah.
And you went back home to the Chicago area, or
No,
did you come back?
My hometown was 200 miles south of Chicago.
Oh, okay.
So I went back there very briefly.
Whereabouts was that?
In Robinson, Illinois.
Oh, okay, okay.
And it was, you know, as I say, I wanted to come back to Chicago. I expected to come back there, but it was a difficult time, or different, I should say, for nurses, because they had started the cadet nurse program. And so all hospitals, I don't know, maybe their training was 2 or 3 years, I don't remember. I wasn't a part of that. But they were still in the training process when we were discharged. So there were no vacancies for nurses. Maybe some, but my friend and I, where we wanted to work, there were no vacancies. So then the girl I went to high school with, and it was from this same town, and we decided, well, we'd go visit our relatives, who one of them lived in Decatur and one of them lived in St. Louis, and we had the same reception. There were no vacancies for nurses because the cadet program, and they, in order to get their education, then part of the program was to work in that institution.
Get that practical experience. And
they had to stay there and work.
So then where did you end up? And
actually, I did private duty, psychiatric private duty, because I had worked in psychiatry when I went into the Army, and I was kept busy, but I had I had fantastic experience as a psychiatric nurse. So then in the Army, I had, one of my good friend had been the nurse at the Sun Valley Ski Lodge. So I had I didn't like my life in Chicago. The apartments was practically impossible to find so my friend and I, then we called, and which making a long-distance phone call was a big deal then.
Yes.
To see if we still could have a job. So we went out to Sun Valley, Idaho,
Oh, my.
and worked the ski season. En route,
Mm-hmm.
this was the same friend that I had been in the Army
Mm-hmm.
with. So she decided, well, maybe we should go through Jackson Hole and go see Yellowstone. So we did that. And I ran out, I didn't have a lot of excess cash, so I went down and volunteered. Not volunteered, I asked for a job at Jackson Hole. So I worked there until the Sun Valley ski season.
Started, uh-huh.
Yeah, and then I came back to Jackson Hole.
Mhm. Now, how did you get up in Door County then?
Actually, I met my husband in Jackson Hole. We were married there.
Oh,
And then when the Midwest was my home, so when our son was born, I thought it was time to come back to the Midwest.
mm-hmm.
And we lived in Cleveland, Ohio for, 30-some years. And then my daughter had met and married a man who he was employed at Kohler Company. So we came here for
that got you
vacation.
to Wisconsin,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, which was a great blessing.
Mhm.
I had a cousin who had moved to Madison. She and her husband worked for UW-Madison. So we came here for vacation, and we came here for 3 years, and then my husband had retired, and I had retired also.
Mhm.
So, and neither of our children lived in in Cleveland or in the Midwest, so
Well,
that's how we came to.
that was
York County.
our good fortune then.
Well,
That,
and mine too, ours too. It was really,
So-
because in the meantime, my son moved to Green Bay,
Mhm.
and then our daughter lived in Kohler for quite a while, so it was really the best thing that,
Well, good, so we got you all here to God's country then.
yes, and it's been a blessing.
Yes. Well, I tell you, it's been a real blessing for me to hear about your experiences being a veterinarian. I just am very, very impressed and so grateful for your service. Our Army couldn't have done the job that it did without that support, that very, very important support of the Army Nurses Corps. And so as one veteran to another, thank you so much for your service. And
Thank you,
thank you
Deb.
for being with us here
Appreciate
today.
the time that you take to do this.
So-
And